Friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Rambo III in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Rambo III. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Rambo III film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So let's start the video. Rambo III is a 1988 American action film starring Sylvester Stallone as Vietnam War veteran John Rambo. Directed by Peter MacDonald, the script was co-written by Stallone and Sheldon Lettich. It is a sequel to Rambo, First Blood Part 6, 1985, and is the third installment in the Rambo series. Richard Crenna reprises his role as Colonel Sam Troutman. The film depicts fictional events during the Soviet-Afghan War. In the film, Rambo sets out on a dangerous journey to the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan in order to rescue his former commander and his longtime best friend, Colonel Troutman, from the hands of an extremely powerful and ruthless Soviet army colonel who is bent on killing both Troutman and Rambo while helping a local band of Afghan rebels fight against Soviet forces threatening to destroy their village. Rambo III was released worldwide on May 25, 1988. At the time of its release, Rambo III was the most expensive film ever made, with a production budget between $58 and $63 million. The film was not well received by critics and grossed less than its predecessor, Rambo. First Blood Part 2, earning $189 million worldwide. It was nominated for 5 categories at the 9th Golden Raspberry Awards, winning Worst Actor. A sequel, Rambo, was released in 2008 with Stallone reprising his role and also directing the film. Plot: after leaving the military behind, former U.S. Army Green Beret John Rambo has settled in a Thai Buddhist monastery, helping with construction work and competing in Krabi Krabong matches in Bangkok, donating his winnings. His old friend and ally, Colonel Sam Troutman, visits and explains that he is putting together a mercenary team for a CIA-sponsored mission to supply the Mujahideen and other tribes as they fight the Soviet army in Afghanistan. Despite being shown photos of civilians suffering at the hands of the Soviets, Rambo refuses to join as he is tired of fighting. Troutman proceeds anyway, but is ambushed at the border by Soviet forces, who kill his team and capture him. Troutman is sent to a large mountain base to be interrogated by Soviet Colonel Zaysin and his henchman Sergeant Kurov. Embassy official Robert Griggs informs Rambo of Troutman's capture, but refuses to approve a rescue mission for fear of drawing the U.S. into the war. Aware that Troutman will die otherwise, Rambo receives permission to undertake a solo rescue on the condition that he will be disavowed in the event of capture or death. Rambo flies to Peshawar, Pakistan, where he convinces arms dealer Mousa Ghani to bring him to Khost, the town closest to the Soviet base where Troutman is held captive. The Mujahideen in the village, led by Chieftain Masood, hesitate to help Rambo free Troutman. Meanwhile, a Soviet informant in Ghani's employ alerts the Soviets, who send 2 attack helicopters to destroy the village. Though Rambo destroys one with a DSHK heavy machine gun, the rebels refuse to aid him any further. Aided only by Musa and a young boy named Hamid, Rambo attacks the base and inflicts significant damage before being forced to retreat. Rambo and Hamid are wounded during the battle, and Rambo sends him and Mousa away before resuming his infiltration. Evading base security, Rambo reaches and frees Troutman before he can be tortured with a flamethrower. He and Troutman rescue several other prisoners and hijack a helicopter to escape the base, but it is damaged during takeoff and crashes, forcing the escapees to flee on foot. An attack helicopter pursues Rambo and Troutman to a nearby cave, where Rambo destroys it with an explosive arrow. A furious Zaysin sends Spetsnaz commandos under Kurov to kill them, but they are routed and killed. An injured Kurov fights Rambo in hand-to-hand combat, but is overcome and killed as well. Rambo and Troutman make their way to the Pakistani border, but are intercepted by Zaysin and his mechanized infantry. Suddenly, Masood's Mujahideen forces, including Musa and Hamid, arrive to rescue them in a massive cavalry charge. In the midst of the battle, Rambo hijacks a tank and fights Feitshans' Mi-24 Hind D, culminating in a head-on charge as both unleash their vehicles' weaponry on each other. Rambo survives by destroying the Hind D with his tank main gun before it can ram him, killing Feitshans. After the battle, Rambo and Trautman bid farewell to the Mujahideen and leave Afghanistan. Cast. Main article, list of Rambo characters. Sylvester Stallone as John J. Rambo. Richard Crenna as Colonel Samuel R. Sammy Trautman. Kurtwood Smith as Robert Griggs. Mark DeJonge as Colonel Alexei Feitshans. Sasongabay as Mosagani. Daudi Shoa as Hamid. Spiros Focus as Masood Production. Development and writing. Sylvester Stallone later said his original premise of the film was more in keeping with the theme of Tears of the Sun, but set in Afghanistan. Harry Kleiner was hired to write a draft, but his script was rejected by Stallone. Several weeks into filming, many of the film's crew were fired, including the director of photography. Stallone said, "The canvas of this movie is so large, you have to constantly think 10 scenes ahead. You can't wing it." They didn't go into the Battle of Waterloo not knowing what their strategy would be. Well, this movie is kind of like a cinematic warfare. We have a huge cast and crew, more than 250 people, and tough locations to deal with. Everyone and everything has to coordinate. Pre-production. In a 2008 online Q&A, Stallone stated that a disagreement over casting led to him firing original director Russell Mulcahy as the director. "He went to Israel 2 weeks before me with the task of casting 24 vicious-looking Russian troops. These men were supposed to make your blood run cold. When I arrived on the set, what I saw was 24 blonde, blue-eyed pretty boys that resembled rejects from a surfing contest. Needless to say, Rambo is not afraid of a little competition, but being attacked by third-rate male models could be an enemy that could overwhelm him." I explained my disappointment to Russell and he totally disagreed, so I asked him and his chiffon army to move on. Mulcahy was replaced by Peter MacDonald, a veteran second-unit director. It was MacDonald's first film as director, but he was very experienced and had directed the second-unit action sequences in Rambo, First Blood Part 2. MacDonald later said, "I tried very hard to change the Rambo character a bit and make him a vulnerable and humorous person. I failed totally. I knew instinctively what was a good and bad shot," he added. Stallone knew his character because it was his third outing as Rambo. "I wasn't shooting Shakespeare, and at times it was hard to take it seriously." MacDonald shot the stick fighting sequence in Bangkok himself, using a handheld camera. The character Masood, played by Greek actor Spiros Focus, was named after Mujahideen commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, who fought the Soviets and later the Taliban. Costumes were procured by buying articles of clothing from Afghan refugees. Filming. The film was shot in Israel, Thailand, and Arizona. According to MacDonald, there were so many restrictions in Israel where you could and couldn't shoot. The producers and Stallone decided they would go back to Arizona, where they had looked long before I was on the film. There was a group there called the Reenactors. We had around 250 of these guys who reenact the American Civil War. They were called on to do fight sequences, which they loved. The scenes at the Thai temple at the beginning, equipment. The Mi-24 helicopters seen in the film are modified Aerospatiale SA-330 Puma transport helicopters with fabricated bolt-on wings similar to the real Hind Ds, which were mainly used in the former Eastern Bloc. The other helicopter depicted is a slightly reshaped Aerospatiale Gazelle. Dedication. The film ends with the on-screen caption, "This film is dedicated to the gallant people of Afghanistan." At some point after the September 11th attacks, an urban legend began that the dedication had actually read, "To the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan," when the film was released in theaters, but then changed to "the gallant people of Afghanistan" after the 2001 attacks, since the Mujahideen were now associated to some extent with the Taliban. This urban legend has been repeated by some scholars. However, this is untrue, and some reviews of the film upon its release even mention the gallant people of Afghanistan dedication. Music. Main article, Rambo III. An extensive film score was written by Jerry Goldsmith, who scored the previous films in the franchise, conducting the Hungarian State Opera Orchestra. However, much of it was not used. Instead, much of the music Goldsmith penned for the previous installment was recycled. The original album, released by Scotty Brothers, contained only a portion of the new music as well as 3 songs, only one of which was used in the film. Bill Medley's version of "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother" played over the end credits. A more complete 75-minute version of the score was later released by Entrada. Release. Marketing. The trailer to the film had a negative response with reports of U.S. audiences booing it. Cut version? Potentially owing to the proximity of its release to the Hungerford Massacre, 1 minute and 5 seconds of footage was removed from the film before it could be granted an 18 certificate by the British Board of Film Classification. The amount of deletions was then nearly tripled for its initial video release. Almost all of this footage was restored to the film upon video submission in 2000, aside from a compulsory cut for animal cruelty. Homa Media. Rambo III was released on DVD on November 23, 2004, and a Blu-ray release followed on May 23, 2008. Rambo III was released on 4K UHD Blu-ray on November 13, 2018. Reception. Box office. Rambo III opened in the United States on May 25, 1988, at 2,062 theaters in its opening weekend, the 4-day Memorial Day weekend, ranking Thamazard 2 behind Crocodile Dundee da Seku. Overall, the film grossed $53.7 million in the United States and Canada, and $135.3 million overseas, giving Rambo III a box office total of $189 million. The film was considered to have underperformed in comparison to the previous film in the series, which grossed nearly 3 times as much domestically. Some critics noted that the timing of the movie, with its unabashedly anti-Soviet tone, ran afoul of the opening of communism to the West under Mikhail Gorbachev, which had already changed the image of the Soviet Union to a substantial degree by the time the film was finished. Critical response. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 41% based on 37 reviews, and with an average rating of 4.70 Kosser 10. The site's critical consensus reads, Rambo 3 finds its justice-dispensing hero far from the thoughtful drama that marked the franchise's beginning, and just as far from quality action thriller entertainment. Metacritic gives the film a weighted average score of 36 out of 100 based on 15 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale. On At the Movies, prominent critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert agreed that Rambo III delivers all the mechanical elements that audiences expect from a big-budget action movie but lacks the heart seen in similar films such as the James Bond series and even its immediate predecessor, Rambo First Blood Part the Sehu. Siskel gave it a thumbs up, while Ebert said he was undecided. However, at the end of the show, Ebert's vote was logged as a thumbs down. Janet Maslin, reviewing the film in the New York Times, described Rambo III as a modernization of the Western film and said that modern special effects technology, a huge budget, and Mr. Stallone's own daring do have conspired to let the film pack a wallop that no traditional Western or war film could match. She criticized the political themes as one-dimensional, but applauded the film's sense of fun and willingness to engage in self-deprecating humor, though she noted that there are also many unintentionally humorous lines. In West Germany, the Deutsche Film- und Medienbewertung, FBW, a government film rating office whose ratings influence financial support to filmmakers, earned criticism after it awarded a worthwhile rating, in German wertvoll, to Rambo III. Originally, Rambo III had a very different ending. Here's why the alternate finale would have dated horribly in the years since its 1988 release. The John Rambo Sylvester Stallone character was first introduced to the world via 1982's First Blood. An American veteran of the Vietnam War, Rambo struggles to find peace in the years following his time overseas. Of course, First Blood also shows the devastating consequences of a small-town police force pushing the already tortured, and superbly combat-trained man over the edge with unnecessarily cruel treatment. In 1988, Rambo III brought the Sylvester Stallone trilogy to a close in bombastic fashion, though it would later be revived for more installments. Rambo III follows the title character as he heads into Afghanistan to save his friend and mentor, Colonel Sam Troutman, played by Richard Crenna. Troutman went to Afghanistan to aid the Mujahideen rebels in their fight against the Soviet occupation. However, the old soldier was captured by the Soviet invaders, and it's up to Rambo to save his friend and escape the war-torn country. While the movie is generally regarded as the worst in the Rambo series, the original ending would have made the movie's reception even worse, especially for today's audiences. Here's what happened in Rambo III's deleted ending and why it would have aged horribly. At Rambo III's end, the namesake warrior has successfully rescued Troutman, killed the villainous Soviet colonel, and brought a fleeting measure of temporary peace to a small corner of Afghanistan. Rambo and Troutman leave the country, and the film concludes. Interestingly, this Sylvester Stallone movie franchise installment also ends with a dedication that reads, "To the gallant people of Afghanistan." Originally, however, an alternate ending would have seen John Rambo decide to stay and fight alongside the Mujahideen in their struggle against the Soviet Union. Although Rambo III's original ending might have made sense in the context of the movie itself, events that have occurred since would have meant that it aged absolutely terribly. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union, at the behest of the pro-Russian local government, was locked in a bitter struggle with the rebel Mujahideen forces. The war in Afghanistan was a tremendous folly for the USSR and is considered one of the greatest failures in Soviet history. Sam Troutman has a provocative line of dialogue in Rambo III. Sylvester Stallone co-wrote the film, as he did with the other series entries, where he directly connects the Soviet-Afghan War to America's misadventure in Southeast Asia. He states to his Soviet captors, "We already had our Vietnam. Now you're going to have yours." The bitter irony here should be obvious to any student of recent history, or any veteran of America's more recent foreign wars. After Russia pulled out of Afghanistan in 1989, before ultimately dissolving in 1991, the various Mujahideen groups were unable to reach a unified consensus regarding how to move forward. Afghanistan remained locked in civil war for many years until the United States invaded Afghanistan following the unprecedented events of September 11th, 2001. While this summation significantly simplifies the situation, Rambo III's alternate ending featured Stallone's main character joining up with a group, members of whom would ultimately form the Taliban and team up with Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization that carried out the 9/11 attacks. The optics of this creative call within the Stallone-led Rambo movie wouldn't be good anyway, but especially with Rambo himself being such a symbolic American film character. Needless to say, this now-lost conclusion would have caused the film to age horribly in today's geopolitical climate. Even without the original ending, Rambo III still lays bare how the United States has spent around 2 decades meddling in a country it openly supported back in the 1980s. The Rambo movies have gone through a lot of ups and downs over the years, but the series' biggest failure might be the thing that saves the franchise after all. The Sylvester Stallone series launched with the understated action thriller First Blood in 1982, and it explored themes like PTSD and the abandonment of Vietnam War veterans. The sequel dropped a lot of the rich social commentary in favor of even more explosive action, and John Rambo became a bona fide hero in Rambo First Blood Part 2. The action reached even more ridiculous heights in Rambo 3, before the series quietly faded to the background for 20 years. Stallone returned as Rambo in 2008's eponymous film, and, despite pressing on into middle age, convincingly portrayed the hardened action hero. It would be another decade before John Rambo made yet another appearance in the poorly received Rambo, Last Blood. But even nostalgia wasn't enough to save the tired legacy sequel. Despite its definitive title, there's always the opportunity for the Rambo franchise to continue. Recognizable series are a hot commodity in Hollywood, and studios are more willing to push a known quantity over something new. As such, a reboot is already on the way, and it may have been spurred on by the franchise's biggest failure. The movies in the Rambo series aren't often cited as high-quality examples of cinema, but there has always been a charm to the sincere original and its off-the-wall sequels. However, Rambo Last Blood broke a decent streak of enjoyable films by delivering a product that wasn't just poor, but downright insulting at times. If 2008's Rambo was a cash grab, Last Blood is somehow even more cynical and calculated than even its predecessor. There were no new ideas introduced in the 2019 movie, and it instead relied on the name value of its franchise and the continued popularity of Sylvester Stallone. The action may have been top-notch, but the writing and execution was hardly above the level of the oft-derided geezer-teaser genre. Stallone gave an attempt at a performance, but with a script that was wholly disinterested in building the Rambo character, there was only so much the Hollywood veteran could do. To say that Rambo and his action hero antics were worn out would be an understatement. And the issues of the forequel were magnified tenfold in the 5th film. Its attempts to link Rambo back to his Vietnam experiences did a disservice to those who actually fought in the conflict, and it looks weak and artificial when compared to First Blood. Besides the original movie, which got pretty decent reviews, the Rambo series has never been popular with critics. However, it has proven to be a financial commodity since the beginning, and that's the biggest reason why Rambo has kept returning again and again. Shockingly, Last Blood was so bad that it was something of a financial failure too. Compared to 2008's Rambo, which made about $110 million via Box Office Mojo, or about $160 million after inflation, Last Blood squeaked by with a narrow margin of profit. The 2019 film made about $90 million against a reported budget of $50 million, meaning it only made about $10 million when factoring in marketing and advertising costs. While that is technically a profit, it's far too narrow a margin for any studio to want to invest a considerable sum of money in making another sequel. All this likely added up to the decision to give Rambo a hard reset, with a reboot film confirmed to be in development. Critical reception matters little, but money always talks in Hollywood. Since the movie did make some money, the Rambo franchise isn't being completely discarded, but it's clear that the things that worked in 2008 weren't working again. Even Sylvester Stallone's name wasn't enough for it to overcome its modest budget and turn a significant profit, and studio executives bailed on Stallone's hopes for another Rambo sequel. No matter what direction the Rambo franchise has chosen to go in the future, it's obvious that Sylvester Stallone's time in the role has come to an end. Nearly 80, Stallone had a great run as the veteran-turned-action hero, but even he couldn't convincingly keep up the machismo act as an octogenarian. Not to mention, it became increasingly less believable that Rambo himself would keep getting involved in action-packed scenarios, with each sequel groaning under the weight of its own contrived premise. The future of the franchise is a prequel reboot, which is exactly what is needed to keep interest high in the 40-year-old series. Instead of trying to replace Stallone and erase his legacy with a straight remake, a prequel could add to the franchise lore without disturbing what was already established. Rambo's time during the Vietnam War is essentially what shaped him as a character, and there's a plethora of ideas to explore in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Should the prequel reboot prove to be a smashing success, then Hollywood could look into fleshing out Rambo's years between the war and his appearance in First Blood. What's more, it's always possible to invent new adventures that happen between the original films, and Rambo isn't the kind of character who is lacking for potential plots. He's part of something bigger. The rebels might not have fully trusted him before, but now they are fighting side by side, and it feels like Rambo's finally found a sense of belonging, of purpose. Even though he's a one-man army, he's learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies in alliances. The chaos of the escape is intense. It's everything we expect from a Rambo movie: explosions, gunfire, the whole 9 yards. But there's a moment during the firefight when you see a shift in Rambo. He's not just doing this for Troutman anymore. He's doing it for the cause. The mission's grown beyond just saving one person. It's about saving an entire group of people who have nothing but their will to fight. Rambo's fighting for them now, too. And in that moment, you realize something big. This isn't the same Rambo who was running away from the violence before. His evolved, and you can see that he's beginning to believe that there's more to life than just survival. As they make their way to the final part of the escape, there's a moment that'll make your heart stop. The Soviets, relentless as ever, finally get the upper hand. Troutman is captured again, and Rambo is left with a heartbreaking choice: run or go back in and save him once more. It's a gut-wrenching decision. Rambo, exhausted, battered, and on the verge of collapse, knows he can't stop. He can't leave his friend behind. And even though it seems like he's out of options, there's this fire in his eyes. It's that classic Rambo determination. The guy doesn't give up. He never has, and he never will. In this moment, everything is on the line. The Soviets have everything in their control, and it feels like there's no way out. But Rambo has always been unpredictable. He's always the guy who finds a way to turn the tables when you least expect it. Just when you think the movie's about to end in total failure, Rambo does what Rambo does best. He fights back. And he does it with such raw power, with such intensity, that it's impossible not to feel the emotional rush of it all. This is more than just action. This is about redemption. It's about Rambo finding his way back to who he was, but with the wisdom and pain of everything he's been through. The final part of the second half plays out like the crescendo of a symphony. Rambo, with everything against him, faces down the Soviet army, pulling off an escape so audacious, so daring, that it's almost impossible to believe. But there's no denying it. He's done it. Against all odds, Rambo gets Troutman back and they make their way toward freedom. It's the perfect mix of action and emotion. There's no big celebration, no slow motion, victorious music. Instead, there's just this quiet moment between Rambo and Troutman. They don't need words. They both know what's been done, what's been sacrificed. And in that quiet moment, you realize that this is the point where everything changes. The second half of the movie hits you hard because it ties everything back to those earlier moments. The bond between Rambo and Troutman is central, and every decision, every fight has been leading up to this. It's a mix of survival, loyalty, and redemption with Rambo finding himself in places that test his limits both physically and emotionally. It's not just about the explosions or the gunfights. It's about what Rambo's willing to give up, how far he'll go, and the sacrifices he makes to protect the people he cares about. By the time the movie wraps up, you've been through the ringer. You've watched Rambo struggle, fight, and dig deeper than he ever thought possible. And it's a payoff. That's worth every bit of the journey. When we first see Rambo, and Rambo 3 is almost unrecognizable compared to the warrior from the previous films. His working at a Buddhist monastery training, living a quieter life, far from the brutality of combat, this side of Rambo feels like a man who's trying desperately to get away from who he is. And yet, you can't escape that intensity in his eyes. It's as if the war is always present in him, no matter how much time has passed. Stallone does a remarkable job of showing that inner conflict in a way that feels raw and real. It's not just what Rambo does that speaks to his character, but the way he holds himself, the weight of his past and the way he moves, the way he talks, or in most cases doesn't talk. When Colonel Troutman enters the picture, Rambo's world is jolted. He can't escape his past anymore, even if he wants to. Troutman is the one person who has always understood him, who's seen the side of him that others couldn't. Richard Crenna as Troutman is the perfect counterpoint to Rambo. Where Rambo is all muscle and silent rage, Troutman is calm, measured, and strategic. Their relationship has always been built on trust. And in Rambo 3, that trust is pushed to its breaking point. Troutman's capture is the catalyst that pulls Rambo. Battlefield. But what really drives Rambo isn't just loyalty, it's a sense of unfinished business. He's not only going to rescue his friend, but he's also going to prove to himself that he hasn't lost the ability to make a difference, to be something more than the soldier he's always been. What's heartbreaking, though, is that the more Rambo tries to prove he's still got it, the more he's faced with the consequences of his past. He's good at adds more weight to the invisible chains around him. When he's deep in the heart of Afghanistan, battling not just the Soviets, but also his own demons, we get glimpses of the toll it takes on him. There's one moment in the film when Rambo faces off with a Soviet soldier. The fight's intense, brutal, but it's not just about the violence. You see Rambo's eyes. There's a part of him that's disgusted by what he's doing. The more he kills, the more he becomes the monster he's tried so hard to bury. It's a powerful moment, and Stallone brings all that unspoken weight to the surface with just a glance. But despite that inner turmoil, Rambo's loyalty to Troutman never waver. That's the core of Rambo's character, loyalty, no matter the cost. When Troutman's captured, it's not just a mission anymore. It's a personal call to arms. And that's what drives Rambo forward through the darkest moments of the film. He might be fighting against an overwhelming enemy, but more than that, his fighting against everything he's become. And then there's Colonel Troutman, the man who in many ways represents everything Rambo could have been. Troutman has never been the raw warrior Rambo is. He's calm, collected, a man of discipline. But what makes Troutman interesting, especially in Rambo 3, is the sense that he's caught between two worlds as well. He's an officer, a soldier, but the more we learn about him, the more we realize that he's just as broken by war as Rambo is. He's haunted by the things he's had to do, the people he's lost, and the way he's used Rambo. Crenna brings a quiet intensity to Troutman that shows just how much he's carried. He's not a man without flaws. He's a man who's tried to do the right thing, but is weighed down by the brutal realities of war. And when he's captured by the Soviets, you can see the desperation in his eyes. Not just for his own life, but for the lives of the men he's led into this mess. Especially Rambo. The relationship between Rambo and Troutman is the emotional heart of the film. It's built on history, on trust, on a bond that goes deeper than words, and when the two are finally reunited, you feel the weight of that. It's not just a rescue mission. It's about the two men facing the reality that their world is one of constant war, of endless fighting, of the toll that violence takes on the human soul. There's a quiet moment between them just before the chaos really picks up again, where they don't have to say anything. It's just two men who've been through hell and know what it means to stand by each other no matter what. In that brief exchange, you can see all the years of struggle, of trust, of betrayal, and of survival. It's one of the most powerful moments in the film, and it speaks to the heart of what Rambo's journey has always been about. Then we have the Mujahideen, the Afghan rebels who join Rambo in his fight. They are not major characters in the traditional sense, but they play a crucial role in the second half of the movie. Initially, Rambo is very much a man on his own, trusting no one, relying only on himself. But as he works alongside the Mujahideen, he begins to see something he's never seen before. People who are fighting not just for survival, but for their homes, for their people. The Mujahideen become more than just allies. They become a mirror to Rambo. They remind him of why he fights, why he's always fought. Not for the glory, not for the thrill, but because there's something worth fighting for. They are not soldiers. They are everyday people who've had everything ripped away from them by a foreign enemy, and yet they still stand and fight. It's a humbling thing for Rambo to witness, and through his interactions with them, we see him start to reconnect with his sense of purpose. The rebels also show Rambo that there's a place for him in the world, even beyond the violence. He might not have peace within himself, but there's a strange, unspoken peace that comes from fighting alongside those who understand what it means to resist. Finally, there's the unseen presence of the Soviet soldiers. They are the antagonists, sure, but they are more than just faceless enemies. They represent everything that Rambo and the Mujahideen are fighting against: oppression, power, and the brutality of war. Rambo's battles with them aren't just physical. They are ideological. The Soviets are a machine, relentless, impersonal. But Rambo, with all his scars, is a force of nature. He's not just fighting for himself anymore. He's fighting for something greater than that. Each battle he faces against them is less about defeating an enemy and more about reasserting his humanity. When he's up against the Soviets, it's a clash of ideologies. The Soviets want control. Rambo wants freedom. And even though it's an uneven fight, you sense that Rambo isn't just fighting for his life. He's fighting for the souls of those who've been crushed under the weight of the Soviet machine. At the end of the film, you don't just feel like Rambo survived the battle. You feel like he's emerged from something even more complex. He's come face to face with his own humanity, with his past, with his friends and enemies alike. And in doing so, he's begun the painful, difficult process of coming to terms with who he is, who he was, and who he might still become. There's something uniquely powerful about the way Rambo evolves in Rambo 3. He's not just the action hero we expect. He's a man fighting for redemption, for meaning, and for the bond of loyalty that keeps pulling him back into the chaos. And Stallone, with all his intensity, vulnerability, and grit, brings that journey to life in a way that feels not just believable, but deeply emotional. Troutman, Rambo's true anchor, provides the balance to Rambo's fury, and their connection drives the heart of the film. The supporting characters, the Mujahideen, the Soviets, the rebels all serve to challenge Rambo's ideas about war, sacrifice, and friendship. In the end, Rambo 3 isn't just about war, it's about the struggle between who you've been and who you want to be. And at the heart of it all is a man trying humanity, even when the world keeps dragging him back into the violence he spent his. First off, there's this subtle yet powerful detail in the way Rambo is framed throughout the movie. It's easy to just chalk it up to the action, the fights, the explosions, but there's a recurring motif that gets at something deeper. Notice how Rambo is almost always filmed in isolation. Whether he's in the monastery at the start, in the desolate Afghan mountains, or fighting the Soviets, the camera keeps him in frames that make him look like a lone figure, separated from everything around him. This isn't just a stylistic choice, though. It's like the movie is constantly reminding us that Rambo is in his heart alone. Even when he's surrounded by people, like when the Mujahideen finally join his fight, he's still this isolated figure burdened by his past. That feeling of being alone is a massive part of his character arc. He's always been disconnected from normal society, from the peace that others can find, and the way they film him shows that struggle. Did you notice that there's almost no music in the early parts of the movie? It's super subtle, but it makes a difference. It's almost as if the silence reflects Rambo's inner emptiness. The few times there is music, it's tense and dissonant, heightening the anxiety in the air. But once Rambo's back in action, once he's fighting for something bigger than himself, when the stakes are high and the finally kicks in, almost as if Rambo's mind too is coming back to life. It's like the soundtrack mimics his emotional journey. The silence at the start, that's the quiet of a man who's lost in his own mind. The music that follows, that's Rambo finally finding his purpose again. Here's something I love. The subtle foreshadowing in the first fight scene when Rambo's fighting that guy in the monastery. It's a small moment, but Rambo holds back at first. He's still in that I don't want to fight anymore mode. But as the fight progresses, he taps into that raw, violent part of him. It's a clear call back to the old Rambo, the one we saw in First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2. The way he fights isn't just about survival. It's like his rediscovering who he is. It's a quiet moment of self-realization, and it's subtle enough that unless you're paying attention, it can slip by unnoticed. That scene tells us that no matter how much Rambo tries to walk away from violence, it's always going to be a part of him. The fight's almost like a mini version of his larger struggle throughout the movie. He's not looking for peace, really. He's just trying to keep the chaos at bay. And when it bursts out, it's almost like he can't control it. Another one you might have missed, there's a little symbol that shows up during Rambo's first meeting with the Afghan rebels. As Rambo is talking to the leader of the Mujahideen, the camera zooms in on the leader's belt, buckle. It's a small, unremarkable piece of jewelry, but if you look closely, it has a symbol on it. The same symbol that the rebels carry on their flags throughout the movie. It's a representation of resistance, of standing against a greater power. At first glance, it seems like just another costume detail, but when you stop to think about it, it's actually pretty brilliant. This symbol isn't just about the rebels, it's about Rambo too. He's the ultimate symbol of resistance, not just fighting against the Soviets, but against the forces within himself too. The fact that the symbol is subtly placed on the belt of a key character reinforces that idea. Rambo and the Mujahideen are on the same side, but they're also two sides of the same coin. Both are battling for something, whether it's for freedom, survival, or redemption. And that tiny little buckle hints at that connection. You almost wouldn't catch it unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. There's a bigger nod to Rambo's own internal struggle when we see his use of the bow and arrow throughout the movie. It's easy to forget that Rambo in the first film was more about strategy and using his environment to his advantage. He wasn't this invincible force of nature like he is in the sequels. But by the time we hit Rambo 3, the bow and arrow are almost symbolic of him trying to reconnect with that past, that version of himself who was more grounded, more connected to his environment. In a world of guns and explosives, the bow is primitive, quiet, and precise. It's as if Rambo on some level is telling himself that is still in control, that despite the chaos around him, he can still make a difference. When he uses it against the Soviets in the middle of the action scenes, you can see the methodical nature of his character shining through. He's not just a brute force, he's a strategist at heart. That bow and arrow is a subtle but powerful way the film nods to his original, more thoughtful nature. There's also something pretty amazing about the way Rambo 3 plays with themes of loyalty and trust. The entire film is built on Rambo's relationship with Troutman, and their friendship is the backbone of the entire story. But there's a subtle reference to the military betrayal that's easy to overlook. When Rambo is talking with the CIA officer at the beginning of the film, there's this tiny, almost throwaway line where the officer mentions that the government's interest in Afghanistan is purely political. He's talking about the Mujahideen. But what's fascinating is that this comment mirrors the larger issue Rambo has with authority. Throughout the movie, Rambo's always working against some larger system, whether it's the government, the Soviets, or even the military itself. The whole point of his character is that he's always been a pawn, always been used for little line about the CIA's motivations. It's a clue to why Rambo does what he does. He's not out there saving the world because of some noble cause. He's doing it because he's learned that in the end, you can't rely on anyone else to fix things for you. You have to fight your own battles, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. Then there's this subtle piece of character development that I absolutely love. If you pay attention to the way Rambo carries himself after every battle, there's this quiet acknowledgement that the violence has taken a toll on him. After each skirmish, after every fight, you see him covered in mud, dirt, and blood. But the way the camera lingers on his face is so telling. It's almost as if Rambo's seeing himself for the first time in years. And not just as a soldier, but as a person who's been changed by all the violence. He's not invincible, he's hurt, he's scarred. But it's not the physical pain that bothers him. It's the fact that he knows deep down that no matter how hard he tries to avoid it, he'll always be pulled back into the violence. There's one moment after a major battle where the camera slowly zooms in on his face. All you see is the exhaustion in his eyes. It's such a small moment, but it speaks volumes about the toll war has taken on Rambo. And finally, we get to the closing scene, one that's both iconic and poignant in its simplicity. As Rambo and Troutman leave the battlefield, there's this one final line that Rambo delivers. It's short, to the point, but it has so much weight. Nothing is over. Now, this line might seem like a typical tough guy moment, but there's more to it. It's a nod to the fact that Rambo's fight isn't just about this mission. It's about him, his internal struggle, the never-ending battle he faces with himself. The film doesn't give us a clean, happy resolution. Rambo's not riding off into the sunset. Instead, we're left with this feeling that his journey is far from over. And that's the ultimate Easter egg. The movie might end, but Rambo's internal war continues. And that's what makes him such a compelling character. His story doesn't have a clear ending because in a way, he's always going to be fighting. It's these little details, these moments that slip by unnoticed that make Rambo 3 such a lay and complex movie. It's more than just explosions and action. It's about a man struggling to hold on to his humanity in a world that keeps trying to tear it away. And those hidden details, they give us a glimpse into the soul of the film. But let's start with a little tidbit about Sylvester Stallone. I mean, we know him as the ultimate action star, but behind the muscles, the tough exterior, and the deep voice, Sly was actually a huge influence on how Rambo 3 turned out. In fact, he wasn't just starring in the movie, he was also the main writer, producer, and, well, director at times. Yep, Stallone got so hands-on that he even wrote much of the movie on set while filming. It wasn't uncommon for him to rewrite scenes right before they shot them. Imagine the chaos of trying to keep up with the changes, but it worked. Stallone himself even said that the experience was exhausting. He was doing everything at once, acting, producing, writing, and it showed. There are moments in the movie where you can almost feel the energy of someone who's burning the candle at both ends, pushing himself to create something bigger than the usual action flick. But here's where it gets weirder. Stallone almost didn't come back for Rambo 3 at all. After Rambo First Blood Part 2, 1985, he was pretty burned out. In fact, he had said, "I'm done with Rambo, I can't do it anymore." And for a while, it seemed like we might never see the famous Green Beret again. But then after a break, Stallone started thinking about it. He figured, hey, maybe there's still more to Rambo's story. And against the odds, he agreed to reprise the role. But here's the kicker. He originally had a different idea for the third movie. Stallone wanted to set it in a completely different place. Instead of Afghanistan, he thought about a more futuristic setting, like a whole new, different kind of war. But the studio pushed him towards Afghanistan and the Soviet-Afghan War because it was more topical at the time. Afghanistan with the Soviets invading was the news headline. So instead of a sci-fi Rambo, we got the more grounded war hero we know today. Imagine if we'd gotten a Rambo movie set in space. Wild, right? Speaking of the war setting, let's talk about the location. Filming a movie like this is always tricky, but for Rambo 3, the team decided to shoot in Thailand, pretending it was the mountains of Afghanistan. There was just one tiny problem. Thailand doesn't look anything like Afghanistan. No, seriously. The jungles, the heat, the landscape, it's all wrong, but they were stuck with it. And that's where things got tricky. Not only did they have to deal with the unconvincing scenery, but Thailand also had a huge monsoon season that would sometimes flood the set. One of the worst problems they faced was the constant rain. The crew couldn't control the weather, and sometimes entire days of shooting were completely ruined. Imagine the frustration. You're out in the middle of the jungle, soaking wet, trying to get a... Weather just refuses to cooperate. There are moments in the film where you can almost tell something's off. For example, there's one scene where Rambo is in this dramatic standoff with Soviet soldiers in the jungle. You can see the fog and mist creeping up in the background, and that's not necessarily artistic. It's just the monsoon season causing all sorts of weather trouble. And speaking of those Soviet soldiers, the ones who are supposed to be the bad guys, here's a crazy bit of trivia. The Soviet soldiers in Rambo 3 weren't even really Soviet soldiers. Okay, so obviously they weren't the actual Soviet army. But here's the thing. The movie crew didn't even bother to hire Russian actors for the role. Instead, they used a mix of American, British, and other European actors to fill the ranks of the enemy. They wore Soviet uniforms, of course, but when you really pay attention, you realize that none of these guys actually have Russian accents. You'd think, for authenticity's sake, they might have cast some Russian actors, but nope, they just put anyone in the uniform and gave them a gun. It's kind of hilarious in hindsight. I mean, these bad guys are supposed to be these menacing, cold-hearted enemies, but they are being played by a bunch of Brits with questionable Russian accents. It's almost as if the movie didn't care that much about realism, which, let's be real, isn't exactly Rambo's strong suit. Anyway, let's shift gears a bit. You know the famous helicopter explosion scene, right? Where Rambo's riding this massive chopper through enemy lines, shooting at everything. It's one of the film's most iconic action moments. Well, get this. The helicopter explosion was so intense that it nearly destroyed the entire set. They weren't just setting off a few fireworks. No, they actually used a real helicopter for this scene. And when they detonated it, the blast was so strong that it sent debris flying everywhere. So much so that they almost lost control of the entire set. The explosion went way bigger than planned, and the crew wasn't entirely sure if they could get the shot or get out of there in one piece. Stallone himself even admitted that at first he thought the whole thing was going to go wrong. He was inside the helicopter in the cockpit when they detonated the charges, and the whole thing was so chaotic that he didn't think he was going to make it out in one piece. It's one of those we got lucky moments. So when you see that explosion in the movie, just know it was more dangerous than anyone expected. But hold on, there's more. Remember that scene where Rambo is captured and tortured by the Soviets? It's one of the darker moments in the film, and it was also one of the most difficult to shoot. The scene where Rambo is hung upside down was actually really painful for Stallone. Not in a method acting kind of way, but in a we totally messed this up kind of way. At first, the team didn't realize how difficult it would be to hang someone by their wrists for an extended period of time. Stallone was a pro about it, but it took a serious toll on him physically. In fact, he said that the pain was so bad that he thought his arms might actually snap. There's a part in the film where you can see the strain on Rambo's face. And it's not just acting. That's Stallone genuinely trying to hang in there. He had to do multiple takes, and after each one, he was exhausted and in pain. It's not often that an actor's real struggle makes it into a scene, but for this one, the suffering was as real as it got. Now, let's talk about the supporting characters for a second, specifically the character of Zahn, the Soviet commander. You'd think the actor playing him would have a clear villainous vibe, right? Well, here's the catch. The actor who played Za, Mark Dyonga, actually didn't realize he was playing the main antagonist for the movie at first. It turns out during the early stages of shooting, he thought he was just playing a minor role. At some point, he learned he was actually the key antagonist, and he had to go back and re-record lines and rework his performance, which is pretty funny if you think about it. Here's this actor, not even sure that he's going to be the villain of the story, and then suddenly he's this major presence. The fact that he played Zan so well despite that is a testament to his skills. Another crazy fact is about the set design. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know that the action takes place in some incredibly harsh environments. But here's the kicker, the set for Rambo's secret training camp in the monastery, that was actually a real Buddhist temple in Thailand. They just used it as is with minimal changes. The monks who lived there were okay with the filming, but they insisted that the production team stick to very strict rules about how to treat the sacred space. The crew had to be careful about where they stepped, where they filmed, and how they interacted with the temple. In fact, there were reports that during the filming, some of the monks were actually blessing the set in between takes. So imagine this. You've got Stallone wielding massive weapons and blowing things up while real-life Buddhist monks are just walking by offering blessings for good luck. The juxtaposition of that is, well, incredibly surreal. By the end of all this, when the credits roll, it's clear that Rambo 3 wasn't just a typical action film. It was a strange, complicated, and downright bizarre production. From nearly losing Stallone to a helicopter explosion to filming in a Buddhist temple with monks offering blessings, the behind-the-scenes world of Rambo 3 was anything but ordinary. The opening. The Wes scene, for example, is one of those quiet moments that could easily be overlooked. But in reality, it sets the stage for everything that comes after. We meet Rambo again, but this time he's in a much different place. He's in a Buddhist monastery, far removed from the chaos he's known. There's this sense of peace about him, or at least he's trying to appear peaceful, but there's a tension just beneath the surface. Stallone's performance here is subdued. He's not the explosive, battle-hardened Rambo we're used to. He's been trying to escape the violence to live a quieter life. But the moment that sets things in motion is so small, it almost feels incidental. A simple conversation between Rambo and Colonel Troutman. Troutman comes to ask Rambo for help in Afghanistan. And that's the spark that lights the fire. In that scene, we don't just see Rambo's reluctance to return to war. We see a man who's been broken down by years of conflict, trying to build something resembling peace within himself. But peace isn't meant for Rambo. That moment where he hesitates before agreeing to help Troutman is more than just a plot device. It's the beginning of his internal conflict, the point where he's forced to confront who he really is. The next powerful scene is when Rambo, now fully committed to the mission, arrives in Afghanistan and begins meeting with the Mujahideen rebels. On the surface, it's just a classic action moment. Rambo makes his grand entrance, and we get some great fight scenes. But it's more than that. What stands out is how Rambo, the loner, gradually starts to interact with these people who are just like him in many ways. They are fighters, survivors. The film doesn't just set them up as the good guys against the Soviets. It's deeper than that. The rebels aren't just people in need of saving. They have their own code, their own purpose. Rambo even begins to respect them, especially the leader who's been fighting a war for his country's freedom. Rambo's internal shift happens gradually here without it being overt. He starts seeing these people not just as victims, but as warriors who understand his pain. It's in the small moments, like when he speaks to the rebel leader about loss and the weight of war. That's when you see it. Rambo's not just in it for Troutman, he's starting to find a sense of purpose again, a reason to fight beyond survival. In some ways, he's seeing a reflection of himself in these rebels. This leads into the midpoint of the film, a scene that's pure Rambo, but carries a lot of emotional weight. After a brutal skirmish with the Soviets, Rambo and the rebels are surrounded. This is the first time we really see Rambo tap into that familiar survival mode. The violence is visceral, and the stakes feel very real. But in this moment, the violence is almost a release for Rambo. You can see it in his eyes as he charges into battle. It's not just about fighting back. It's about confronting his demons, about the inner rage and pain that have been festering in him ever since the Vietnam War. The camera lingers on him as he methodically picks off enemies, his face set in a grim determination. What's fascinating is that Rambo is almost at peace in these moments. It's as if the violence, the chaos, are the only things he knows how to control. This is where we realize that Rambo's not looking for redemption or peace. He's looking for something he can't quite put into words. It's the tragic side of his character that is only truly alive in moments of war. And this scene brings all of that to the surface. His actions are intense, but there's a sadness to it. He's always been a soldier, and no matter how hard he tries to escape it, he's always pulled back into the chaos. The next key scene, and one of the most emotional in the entire film, happens when Rambo is captured by the Soviets. They torture him in a gruesome manner. And this isn't just for shock value. It's a moment that shows Rambo's vulnerability, something we rarely get to see. Up until this point, Rambo's been a force of nature. He's been the hero, the guy who always knows what to do, always in control. But when they strip him down and hang him upside down, there's a real sense of desperation. His body is broken, bruised and helpless. The pain is unbearable. But it's not just the physical torture that breaks him. It's the emotional toll of everything he's been through. In this moment, you see just how much war has scarred him. He's not the invincible soldier anymore. He's a man who's been chewed up and spit out by the system. The way the scene is shot, with the close-ups of Rambo's face, makes you feel every bit of his suffering. It's a rare moment where the action film drops the bravado and shows the true cost of war. And then there's the climax, the big battle where Rambo rescues Troutman and the Mujahideen. There's so much happening here, but what stands out is the emotional weight of Rambo's decision to fight alongside the rebels, not just as their savior, but as a true ally. For the first time in the movie, Rambo's not just fighting for survival, he's fighting for something larger than himself. It's not just about getting Troutman out of enemy hands. It's about showing the world that these rebels have a cause worth fighting for. The explosions and gunfire are the backdrop to Rambo's emotional journey, the final stage of his redemption. What makes the climax so powerful isn't just the action. It's how the action mirrors Rambo's personal journey. By the end of the battle, you realize that Rambo has found a purpose again, not just in saving Troutman, but in fighting for the freedom of the Mujahideen. It's almost as if Rambo, who has been running from war for so long, has finally embraced his place in it. But here's the twist. It's not just about winning. It's about understanding the cost of victory. You don't get the sense that Rambo is happy at the end. There's no triumphant music or slow motion shots of him walking away. Instead, he's just tired. You can feel that exhaustion, that emotional weight in every step he takes. His fought, his won, but he knows that the battle both in Afghanistan and within himself is far from over. One of the last emotional beats comes when Rambo and Troutman share that quiet moment before the final escape. Troutman says, "I want to die in my own bed, in my own country." It's such a simple line, but it sums up everything about both of their characters. For Troutman, it's about peace, about wanting to return to the simplicity of life. For Rambo, it's more complex. He's not sure where home is anymore. In that moment, you understand that Rambo's journey isn't just about defeating the Soviets or rescuing people. It's about finding a place where he can be at peace with who he is. And that's the tragedy. He'll never find it. The war never leaves him, and it never leaves us. It's a reminder that no matter how many battles you win, the scars of war will always remain. These scenes, whether it's the quiet moments of reflection or the brutal action sequences, work together to create a film that's more than just a war story. Rambo 3 is about the emotional cost of violence, about redemption, and the tragedy of trying to escape from a past that keeps dragging you back in. What makes these scenes so important is that they show us not just Rambo as a hero, but as a man grappling with his own humanity. The film doesn't let us forget that, and in doing so, it becomes a deeper, more meaningful exploration of the toll war takes on the human soul. That let's start with something you probably never think about while watching the movie, the locations. The majority of the film takes place in Afghanistan, but as you can probably guess, they weren't actually filming there. Instead, the production was based in Thailand, and they had to work some serious magic to make it look like the rugged Afghan landscape. Now, the irony here is that Thailand, with its lush jungles and tropical climate, couldn't look less like Afghanistan. You'll notice the bright, almost tropical greens in the background of many shots, which is a far cry from the barren, rugged terrains of the Middle East. But the filmmakers made it work. The crew had to be incredibly resourceful, transforming jungles and lush hillsides into a war-torn Afghanistan. At one point, they even built a massive fake mountain, a literal physical structure to shoot some of the action scenes. Talk about a feat of engineering. The challenges of filming in such an unforgiving location were more than just aesthetic. Imagine the heat. It was sweltering, humid, and you could almost feel the sweat pouring off the actors as they filmed their scenes. But the heat wasn't the only issue. The set was located in an area that was prone to monsoon rains, which were known to destroy everything in their path. The crew would sometimes get up at 4 a.m. to shoot before the rains hit, knowing that by midday, everything could come to a screeching halt. The conditions were brutal, but for a movie like Rambo 3, that raw intensity adds to the authenticity of the film. You can feel that in the way the characters fight and move through the set. The action doesn't feel like it's set in a controlled environment. It feels real. as if they are right there in the heart of battle, struggling against the elements as much as they are against the enemy. Now, when it comes to the stunts and action sequences, that's where things get really exciting. You don't just watch a Rambo movie, you experience it. And part of that experience is due to the mind-blowing practical effects they use to bring those wild, intense moments to life. One of the most famous scenes in the movie is Rambo's epic helicopter assault on the Soviet base. It's a stunning sequence with Rambo piloting a chopper while firing off rounds into Soviet soldiers. Explosions going off left and right. What's amazing about this scene is that it's not just CGI, because CGI wasn't really a thing yet. It's real. That helicopter was actually flying over the set with real explosives going off on the ground below. The chopper is a real military helicopter too, not some CGI mock-up. They had to get the real deal, and the production team managed to find a few of them. But flying a helicopter through dense jungle while blowing up stuff left and right, that was no small feat. The explosion effects were similarly impressive. The practical explosions on set were designed to be as impactful as possible. They used massive charges to blow things up, and the timing was critical. Every explosion had to be perfectly coordinated with the action happening around it. There's one moment where a Soviet base is completely obliterated, and you feel the intensity of that destruction, not just through the visuals, but through the sound and vibrations on set. The crew actually had to stand at a distance when the explosions were set off because they were so strong they could have injured O's. So when you see that huge fireball in the distance, know that it was a carefully planned, heart-pounding, and very real explosion that almost rattled the entire crew. Imagine standing in the middle of all that. It's the kind of thing that makes you feel like you're right in the middle of a war zone. One of the coolest and most innovative visual effects in Rambo 3 is how they blended practical effects with the film's broader action sequences. Take, for example, the famous chase scene in the jungle. The filmmakers used helicopters to capture aerial shots, but then they also had ground-level shots of Rambo's foot soldiers running through the thick brush. Combining these perspectives created an adrenaline-pumping sense of chaos. The camera often follows Rambo in tight, quick bursts, making it feel like you're right there with him, running and gunning through the jungle. The filmmakers wanted to give the audience a first-person experience of the action, and they nailed it by mixing those different kinds of shots. The speed, the energy, and the sharpness of the visuals all come together to keep you hooked. Another interesting piece of tech used to keep that feeling of realism was the sound design. The sound of helicopters, explosions, and machine guns is iconic, but there's more to it than just the blaring noise of battle. The sound team took great care in layering the sounds of the environment with the gunfire and explosions. For example, in scenes where Rambo is charging through dense jungle, you can hear the muffled sounds of distant explosions while the camera focuses on Rambo's expressions and his actions. This lay sound design creates an unsettling feeling, as if there's always danger just around the corner. They made sure the sounds weren't just there to fill the silence, they told their own story. The helicopters, the gunfire, even the crunching of leaves underfoot all contribute to the heightened tension. And when those explosions finally do happen, the way the sound hits you, that booming, ear-ringing shockwave, it's a reminder of just how relentless and punishing war can be. Then there's the cinematography. Oh, the cinematography. The filmmakers were all about making Rambo 3 feel massive, almost like a war epic. They used sweeping aerial shots of the jungle, wide shots of battlefields, and intimate close-up shots of Rambo's intense moments. One of the best uses of cinematography is how they emphasize Rambo's isolation. In many shots, you'll notice that the camera lingers on him alone in the middle of the frame, surrounded by chaos, almost as world around him is falling apart while he stands resolute. It's a brilliant visual cue that this is a man who has been left alone in his fight, who has chosen or been forced to face the violence by himself. It's visually striking because it mirrors the emotional isolation Rambo feels throughout the film. One of the most surprising elements of production was how much the actors were involved in their own stunts. Stallone, of course, was famous for doing his own action sequences, but for this movie, he really pushed it. He took on some incredibly dangerous stunts, especially in the action-heavy parts of the movie. There's a sequence where Rambo is flying a helicopter while firing at enemies, and Stallone actually piloted the chopper during some of the filming. There's a wild sense of authenticity in those scenes. Knowing that Stallone was in the cockpit himself actually flying the thing through the air. This gave the action a certain level of rawness that you can't fake with a stunt double or CGI. When you see Rambo in that helicopter, you're seeing Stallone in the moment, feeling the same adrenaline rush as his character. It's no surprise he injured himself a couple of times while filming. At one point, he injured his back during a particularly rough stunt, but true to form, he kept going. That commitment to doing it all himself gave the film a visceral, unpolished edge. And let's not forget the costumes and makeup. When you think of Rambo 3, you probably think of Stallone in his iconic red bandana, battle-worn clothes, and serious stare. But getting that look was a lot harder than it seemed. The crew worked closely with a team of makeup artists to ensure that Rambo's wounds, scars, and general appearance conveyed the toll that the years of fighting had taken on him. The dirt, the sweat, the cuts on his arms, all of these elements were carefully crafted. There's even a scene where Rambo's facial expressions convey exhaustion and inner turmoil, and the makeup team used subtle techniques to make his face look as weathered as possible. It's these little details that make Stallone's portrayal of Rambo stand out. It's not just the action, it's the physicality of the character, and it's all enhanced by the work of the makeup artists. In terms of the overall production process, there were many moments of improvisation, particularly with the dialogue and action scenes. As I mentioned earlier, Stallone was constantly rewriting the script on set. Many of the action sequences were designed on the fly, and there were times when the actors and stunt coordinators had to adapt in real time. That gave the movie an unpredictability, a sense of urgency. The actors were often reacting to the environment around them, and the cinematography was reactive too. This spontaneous energy is what gives Rambo 3 its raw power. Let's start with the most obvious and perhaps most widely discussed theme, the nature of war and its lasting impact. From the very beginning, Rambo 3 is a film about a man struggling with the ghosts of his past. Rambo's attempt at escaping violence by retreating to a Buddhist monastery signals an attempt to find peace after a lifetime of fighting. But it's clear right away that peace isn't something he can simply choose. Rambo's return to battle isn't just about saving his friend, Colonel Troutman, or defeating a foreign enemy. It's about something deeper. The need to confront his own identity, the trauma that war has left on him, and the sense of purpose is always found in violence. The film explores the way war becomes a part of someone's DNA, so deeply ingrained that even when they try to walk away from it, it calls them back. There's a striking moment early in the film where Rambo's eyes are filled with internal conflict when he's asked to join the mission. There's him. It's the fact that he knows on some level that war is something he can't escape. That line between peace and violence is razor thin, and Rambo is always teetering on the edge. This is where the film takes on a poignant, almost tragic dimension. Rambo isn't just fighting for survival or for others. He's fighting to find meaning in a life that's been shaped by conflict. The film doesn't romanticize war, but it does capture the psychological toll it exacts on soldiers. The idea that war isn't just a set of battles, but a long, unending cycle of trauma is something that runs throughout the entire film. But there's also a recurring symbolism around the idea of home. It's not just a physical location, but a state of mind, something that Rambo is constantly searching for but can never truly find. Rambo isn't just fighting for a country or a cause. He's searching for a sense of belonging, a place where he can put down the weight of his past and finally find peace. But no matter where he goes, that peace eludes him. The film plays on this symbolic search for home in several key moments. One of the more subtle ones is when Rambo is in the middle of a jungle firefight, and for a brief second, the chaos of the battle fades into a quiet shot of Rambo standing in the midst of the greenery, staring at a small patch of sky above. The camera lingers on this shot, and for just a moment, it's as if he's contemplating the possibility of a world without violence, but it doesn't last. This fleeting moment, this ideal of home is always just out of reach for him. On a broader level, the film also addresses the relationship between the U.S. and foreign conflicts, particularly in the context of the Cold War. Rambo 3 was released in 1988 at the height of the Soviet-Afghan War, and the film portrays a clear distinction between the rebels, the Mujahideen, and the Soviets, with the latter being depicted as the clear enemy. The film presents a narrative of the U.S. represented through Rambo's character, coming to the aid of the Afghan resistance, but this isn't just a straightforward good guys versus bad guys scenario. It's a commentary on how the US positioned itself as a protector of freedom and justice while often working with regimes that were far from ideal. In real life, the US supported the Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan War, but the political motivations behind that support were less than altruistic. Rambo 3 taps into this complex relationship between foreign policy, ideological battles, and military intervention, all without directly commenting on it. The way Rambo connects with the Mujahideen, especially their leader, shows a certain kinship between these warriors. Despite their differences, they're all fighting for the same reason: freedom. But the film leaves you questioning the true nature of that freedom, who defines it, and at what cost. Is it really worth fighting for? This brings us to the symbol of the rebel leader who becomes one of the most significant characters in the film. He's not just a generic freedom fighter, he represents the idea of resistance, the struggle against oppressive forces, not only for personal survival, but for the survival of a people's culture, values, and way of life. His relationship with Rambo is built on mutual respect. Both are warriors scarred by battle but still standing, fighting for a cause that transcends personal gain. This dynamic plays into a broader theme of loyalty, not just loyalty to a nation or an ideology, but loyalty to a shared humanity. When the leader of the Mujahideen asks Rambo why he's helping, Rambo's response is simple: "I'm just like you." It's in this quiet moment that the film reveals one of its deepest themes: that war, violence, and suffering don't discriminate. They touch everyone regardless of nationality, race, or religion. And in that moment, we see that Rambo, despite his troubled past, is no different from the rebels he's fighting alongside. They are all bound by a common thread: the desire to survive, to protect what they love, and to find meaning in a world that has taken so much from them. There's also the symbolism of the helicopter, which is featured prominently in several of the movie's most intense moments. On one hand, the helicopter is a powerful symbol of destruction. It's a tool of war used by both sides to wreak havoc. But for Rambo, the helicopter also represents his own internal conflict. It's not just a machine. It's an extension of his own war-torn soul. When Rambo takes control of the helicopter during the final battle, it's more than just a tactical move. It's him reclaiming his place in the war, embracing the very thing he's been trying to escape. The helicopter, in many ways, is a metaphor for his journey. A vehicle that can carry him through the chaos, but one that can't take him to peace. Beyond the personal, there's a subtle yet powerful commentary on the nature of power. The Soviets in Rambo 3 aren't just faceless villains. They represent the cold, mechanized force of an empire trying to impose its will on a foreign land. In many ways, they are the antithesis of Rambo and the Mujahideen. Where Rambo is driven by personal motivations and an internal struggle, the Soviets are driven by the machinery of war, by power for the sake of power. And that's where the film hits hardest. It makes us think about the ways in which power is used, abused, and corrupted in the name of freedom or justice. The Soviets are depicted as a faceless, monolithic force, but there's a deliberate contrast between them and the individual fighters like Rambo and the rebels. It's a subtle critique of the way large-scale power struggles ignore the humanity of the people they affect. The focus on individual relationships, on personal sacrifice and loyalty, stands in stark contrast to the impersonal violence of the Soviet machine. The film's final scenes leave us with a somber tone as Rambo and Troutman walk away from the battlefield knowing that the fight they just fought won't be the last one. It's an ending that speaks volumes about the futility of war and the inability to escape from its grip. The final shot of Rambo standing there alone is powerful because it feels like a conclusion that is both final and open-ended. He's done his part, but the war is still inside him. And that sense of unending struggle is what makes the film's message hit so hard. So, what's the ultimate message of Rambo 3? It's not just about action, about the cool stunts, or the grand battles. It's about the human cost of violence, the never-ending cycle of war, and the universal search for peace. It's about soldiers who are forever trapped by their past, their loyalty, and the wars that define them. And perhaps the greatest symbol in the film is Rambo himself, the reluctant warrior who is constantly fighting not just enemies, but his own inner demons. The film forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that sometimes there is no peace and some battles never truly end. Troutman feel raw and real. The dialogue between them wasn't just written lines. It was the culmination of years of respect, camaraderie, and the unspoken history they'd built. The way Crenna would look at Stallone, offering a few words of wisdom or a subtle glance of concern, made you feel like there was so much more than just a mentor-mentee relationship. It felt like they were two people who had weathered storms together, both on screen and off. It wasn't just the leads who had chemistry, even the smaller roles, the side characters seemed to click in a way that made their scenes stand out. For instance, the relationship between Rambo and the Afghan rebel leader, played by Dudi Yusufu, felt grounded in mutual respect. The way these characters interact with shared glances and a kind of unspoken understanding made their bond feel authentic. They weren't just comrades in arms. They were kindred spirits, both shaped by the same brutal forces, but still holding on to a sense of humanity. Yuzu's performance as the rebel leader was a perfect counterbalance to Stallone's Rambo. Where Rambo was a man of few words, the rebel leader had a quiet wisdom that contrasted Rambo's intensity, but also matched his determination. Watching them together, it wasn't hard to imagine these two men from different worlds coming together for a common cause. But not everything on set was all camaraderie and smooth sailing. There were behind-the-scenes struggles and challenges that made the filming process far from glamorous. The conditions in Thailand were grueling, and it wasn't just the heat and the unpredictable weather that made the experience difficult. Stallone, ever the perfectionist, would often push himself and the entire crew to their limits. On one occasion, during a particularly intense action sequence, Stallone injured his back while performing a stunt. Instead of calling it a day and resting, he insisted on continuing to film. Even though the injury was serious enough to have sidelined most other actors, it wasn't just about his personal toughness. It was about setting the tone for the entire cast and crew. Stallone's relentless work ethic had a trickle-down effect. If he wasn't going to back down, no one else was either. Richard Crenna, too, showed his dedication to the project. He wasn't the type to just show up, deliver his lines, and leave. He fully embraced the physicality of his role. While he wasn't doing the heavy stunts that Stallone was, Crenna was there in the thick of things, helping set the tone on set, ensuring that every scene had the kind of emotional depth needed to balance out the action. And it wasn't just the actors who formed a bond. The crew, too, was in the trenches together. Thailand's terrain, with its unpredictable weather, dense jungles, and often hazardous conditions, forced the production team to work together in ways they'd never expected. The crew had to be incredibly adaptable, changing schedules at the last minute to avoid the monsoon rains, or even dealing with wild animals that would sometimes wander onto the set. The producers and stunt coordinators also had to find creative solutions to the technical limitations they faced. There were no computers to do the heavy lifting with visual effects, so everything had to be done with practical effects. Explosions had to be timed just right, and helicopters had to fly in ways that weren't always safe, but were crucial to capturing the intensity of the battle scenes. The way the crew worked together to overcome these challenges became a shared experience that, in a way, mirrored the themes of the film itself. There was a sense of unity, a sense of being in a war zone together, not just for the film story, but for the success of the movie itself. The emotional weight of the behind-the-scenes relationships and struggles translated directly into the film. Audiences picked up on the authenticity of the cast's performances and their interactions. The film's reception upon release was a mixed bag. Critics weren't universally kind, but audiences who went to see it loved the non-stop action and the deeper emotional moments between Rambo and his allies. While some critics felt that the film played too heavily into the action tropes and wasn't as character-driven as the first two Rambo films, the general public didn't seem to mind. For fans, Rambo 3 was an exciting continuation of Rambo's story. They appreciated the stakes, the intense combat sequences, and the return of the character they had grown to love. In many ways, the film cemented Rambo as a pop culture icon, not just for his physical strength, but for his emotional depth, something that Stallone had worked hard to bring out in his portrayal. Over the years, Rambo 3 has found a more favorable place in the hearts of audiences. What was once dismissed as a typical action film has become a cult classic, often praised for its balance of heart-pounding action with moments of unexpected emotional depth. The character of Rambo, once viewed simply as a symbol of military might, became a more complicated figure, embodying the trauma and psychological toll of war. Over time, the film's commentary on the political landscape of the 1980s, especially in relation to the US and Soviet Union, has also become more relevant as global conflicts have evolved. Viewers now look back on the film not just as a piece of 80s nostalgia, but as a nuanced commentary on power, loyalty, and the human cost of war. Fans who grew up with Rambo 3 have watched it with new eyes as they've aged, seeing things they missed when they were younger. The emotional arcs of characters like Rambo and Troutman, once overshadowed by the sheer action of the story, now stand out in sharper relief. They see the layers of humanity in Rambo's journey and the way Stallone and Crenna brought that journey to life with such subtlety. Even more so, the relationships between Rambo and the supporting characters have gained a deeper significance, now seen as a reflection of the broader themes of brotherhood, survival, and sacrifice. And as for the behind-the-scenes stories, they've only grown more legendary with time. Stallone's commitment to the physicality of the role, his injuries on set, and the relentless pace of filming have all become part of the film's legacy. The crew's ability to adapt to the unpredictable conditions in Thailand, pulling off daring stunts and creating explosive action sequences with practical effects, has become a benchmark for how films of that era were made. And the camaraderie between the actors, from the veterans like Crenna to the newer faces, added a genuine layer of warmth to a film that could have easily fallen into the trap of being just another action blockbuster. As the years have gone by, it's clear that Rambo 3 holds a special place in the hearts of those who experienced it, whether they were watching it for the first time back in 1988 or revisiting it today. The chemistry between the cast, the behind-the-scenes struggles, and the film's lasting themes have ensured that it's more than just an action movie. It's a testament to the power of storytelling, even in the most brutal of contexts, and the bonds that are formed when people come together to create something greater than themselves. The characters feel real, especially the relationships between Rambo and his allies. Stallone's portrayal of Rambo as a man both fierce and vulnerable pulls you in, making you care about his fate in a way that's not just driven by action, but by genuine emotional connection. Richard Crenna's return as Colonel Troutman brings the right balance of wisdom and tenderness, elevating the story's heart. Even the smaller roles, like the Afghan rebels, bring a quiet depth to the film. Every character feels like they are fighting for something bigger than themselves. And that's what gives the film its heart. But what really makes this film stand out is the way it straddles the line between action and emotional depth. You on the edge of your seat during the battles, but at the same time, you're reflecting on the bigger picture. It's this balance of high-octane action with meaningful character-driven moments that elevates Rambo 3 above many other films in the genre. It's easy to dismiss it as just another action flick, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find layers of meaning about war, survival, and the human cost of violence. And let's not forget about the behind-the-scenes magic that made it all happen. The crew's hard work in the unforgiving jungles of Thailand, the stunts performed with meticulous care, and the bond between. The cast members brought a level of authenticity to the screen that you can't fake. Stallone's dedication to the role, Crenna's steady hand, and the camaraderie on set gave the movie a genuine feeling of togetherness, a reflection of the themes within the story itself. Now, after all these years, Rambo 3 remains an action-packed, emotionally driven classic that continues to resonate with fans, both old and new. It's not just a film about a man fighting in a foreign land. It's a story about the cost of war, the search for peace, and the friendships forged through shared struggle. It's a reflection of the human spirit battling against the odds and finding strength, even in the most difficult of circumstances. And that's why it stood the test of time. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.